The Tuesday morning sun, usually a welcome intrusion through the blinds of my cubicle, felt harsh and unwelcome. Maybe it was the lingering exhaustion from another restless night, or the impending deadline for the Peterson account, but a knot of unease had tightened in my stomach since I'd stepped out of the subway. It was a feeling as subtle as a draft, a whisper of cold air on the back of my neck, easily dismissed, yet impossible to ignore. I worked at Innovision Dynamics, a soulless glass and steel behemoth that dominated the downtown skyline. My days were spent navigating the labyrinthine corridors of spreadsheets, marketing strategies, and office politics. It was a life that was, in its own sterile way, predictable. Until Tuesday. As I navigated the revolving doors of the lobby, I saw him. He was standing just beyond the polished chrome barrier on the pedestrian plaza, a stark anomaly against the hurried rhythm of morning commuters. He was unremarkable in appearance. Average height, nondescript clothing, maybe late 30s or early 40s. But it was his face that snagged my attention, a fixed point in the swirling chaos. He was staring directly at the Innovision entrance, and on his face was a smile. Not a friendly smile, not a welcoming smile. It was wide, unnervingly so, stretching his lips thin and taut, revealing a neat row of teeth that seemed just a fraction too long. His eyes, dark and deep-set, didn't crinkle at the corners, didn't soften the starkness of the grin. They were fixed, unwavering, locked onto the glass doors as if he could see through them, seek me. A shiver, involuntary and cold, ran down my spine. I told myself it was nothing. Just some weirdo maybe waiting for someone. I hurried past, forcing my gaze forward, focusing on the familiar route to the elevators. Inside the crowded lift, surrounded by the mundane chatter of colleagues, I tried to shake off the feeling. "It's just your anxiety, Sarah," I muttered under my breath, staring at my reflection in the mirrored walls. My reflection looked back, pale and strained, the faint circles under my eyes more pronounced than usual. But even as I went through the motions of my workday, the emails, the meetings, the forced smiles at office jokes, the image of the smiling man lingered. It was a phantom sensation, like a scratchy tag on a new shirt, nagging at the edge of my awareness. Lunchtime arrived, a blessed escape from the fluorescent hum of the office. I usually met my friend, Emily, at the food court across the street. The plaza was a vibrant hub, bustling with people enjoying their midday break. As I approached, my eyes instinctively scanned the periphery, a habit born of, what? Paranoia? Ridiculous. And then I saw him. He was standing near the fountain, slightly to the side of the main throng, yet somehow distinct. The same man. The same smile. He was facing the Innovision building, his smile unwavering, his gaze fixed. He hadn't moved from his spot outside the entrance. He was simply there. My breath hitched. It couldn't be him. What were the odds? Downtown plazas were crowded. It had to be a coincidence. I forced myself to walk towards Emily, who was waving from a table near the falafel stand. "Hey, you look a bit pale," she commented as I sat down, pulling out a chair with jerky movements. "Did you see him?" I blurted out before I could censor myself. Emily frowned, mid-bite into her wrap. "See who? Brad from accounting, looking even more sleep-deprived?" "Yeah, poor guy." No, outside. Near the fountain, or maybe earlier, outside the building in trance." I stammered, my voice tight. Emily's brow furrowed deeper. "Sarah, are you okay? You're being weird." "There's a man," I tried to explain, "just standing there, smiling. He was outside this morning and now he's here, just staring at the building." Emily glanced around the plaza, then back at me, a hint of concern in her eyes. "Honey, there are tons of people here. Maybe you just saw someone and you're projecting. You've been stressed about Peterson all week." I wanted to argue to make her understand the specific wrongness of it, but the words felt clumsy, inadequate. How could I explain the chilling fixity of his gaze, the unsettling stillness of his smile? It wasn't just a man smiling, it was that man smiling in that way with that unwavering stare. "Maybe you're right," I conceded, forcing a weak smile. I picked at my salad, the appetite suddenly gone. But inside, the seed of unease was sprouting roots, twisting and turning in the fertile ground of my anxiety. The rest of the afternoon was a blur of spreadsheets and forced smiles, punctuated by furtive glances out the window. I told myself I was being ridiculous, letting my imagination run wild. But the image of the smiling man was seared into my mind, a persistent watermark on my perception. When the clock finally struck 5, releasing me from the fluorescent-lit prison, I felt a surge of relief, quickly followed by a fresh wave of apprehension. I had to go outside. I had to face the plaza again. Taking a deep breath, I joined the exodus of office workers heading for the exits. As I stepped through the revolving doors, I scanned the plaza, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. He was there. Just as before, standing on the pedestrian plaza facing the Innovision building. The same man. The same smile. But this time the smile seemed wider, somehow amplified. And this time his gaze, though still fixed on the building, felt directed. Directed at me. My breath hitched. My steps faltered. He couldn't be watching me. It was impossible. Yet, as I walked towards the subway entrance, I could feel his gaze on my back, a physical weight, cold and unsettling. I risked a glance over my shoulder. He hadn't moved. He was just standing there, a statue of unnatural cheer in the fading evening light, smiling at me, or at least in my direction. That night, sleep was a fractured, restless affair. Images flickered behind my eyelids, the wide smile, the unblinking eyes, the still figure in the bustling plaza. I woke up several times, drenched in a cold sweat, the lingering feeling of being watched clinging to me like a shroud. Wednesday dawned gray and overcast, mirroring the oppressive weight in my chest. The knot of unease had tightened into a cold, hard stone. I debated calling in sick, hiding in the sanctuary of my apartment, but the idea felt cowardly, irrational. And somehow, I knew that even within the four walls of my home, the feeling wouldn't dissipate. As I walked to the subway, I found myself constantly looking over my shoulder, a nervous tic I couldn't control. The streets were crowded, the morning rush in full swing, yet I felt a creeping sense of isolation, as if I was walking through a world slightly out of sync with reality. Stepping out of the subway station near Innovision, I braced myself. I scanned the plaza, my heart hammering against my ribs. He was there. Exactly as before, standing on the pedestrian plaza, facing the building. The smile, if anything, seemed even more pronounced, almost grotesque in its unwavering cheerfulness. His eyes, dark pits in his pale face, held no warmth, no humor, only a chilling fixity. It wasn't just a coincidence anymore. This was deliberate. But why? Why was he there? Why was he smiling? And why, God, why was he always there? I quickened my pace, desperate to reach the relative safety of the office lobby. As I passed him, something caught my eye, a detail I hadn't noticed before. His hands. They were hanging loosely at his sides, perfectly still. Too still. And they were pale. Unnaturally pale, almost translucent. They looked cold, lifeless. A wave of nausea washed over me. I hurried into the building, practically sprinting towards the elevators. Inside the lift, I leaned against the mirrored wall, gasping for breath. My reflection stared back, wide-eyed and panicked. I touched my face, feeling the cold sweat slicking my skin. "You okay, Sarah?" A voice startled me. It was Mark, a colleague from HR, his brow furrowed with concern. "Yeah, fine," I mumbled, forcing a smile that felt brittle and fake. "Just didn't sleep well." "Rough night?" Mark chuckled, oblivious to the true source of my distress. "Tell me about it. Peterson account keeping you up too?" I managed a weak nod, grateful for the mundane explanation. The elevator doors opened and I practically fled, escaping into the anonymity of the office corridor. Throughout the morning, the unsettling details began to accumulate, like grains of sand piling up to form a dune of dread. I started noticing things about the smiling man that went beyond the initial strangeness. He never blinked. Not once. I'd started consciously watching him, furtively glancing out the window, telling myself it was just to reassure myself he wasn't there, but really, I was watching him. And in all those glances, I never saw him blink. His eyes remained fixed, wide open, unnervingly dry. He never moved. Apart from the subtle shifting of his weight, he was completely still. He stood like a statue, impervious to the flow of human traffic around him, the changing weather, the passage of time itself. He always faced the Innovision building. No matter where I saw him, at the entrance, near the fountain, even across the street, he was always oriented towards the building, as if drawn by some invisible magnetic force. And the smile. It never changed. It was always the same wide, fixed, unsettling grin. It didn't respond to anything. Not to passers-by, not to the weather, not even to why me. It was just there. By lunchtime, the whispers of doubt had grown into a chorus of panic. I couldn't ignore it anymore. Something was deeply, fundamentally wrong. This wasn't just a weirdo. This was something else. I confided in Emily again at lunch, my voice trembling slightly as I recounted the new details, the unblinking eyes, the stillness, the unnatural pallor of his hands. This time, Emily listened more intently, her usual lightheartedness replaced by a serious frown. Okay, she said slowly, chewing thoughtfully on her sandwich. That is weird. Unnervingly weird. But maybe he's mentally ill? Having some kind of episode. Maybe, I conceded, wanting to grasp at any rational explanation. But it's been 2 days, Emily. 2 days of him just standing there, smiling. And he's always facing this building. It feels targeted. Emily shivered, despite herself. Okay, targeted is a bit dramatic, don't you think? But I get what you mean. It's definitely creepy. And nobody else notices him, I said, my voice dropping to a near whisper. I've asked people. Mark, Sarah from accounts, even Mr. Henderson in marketing. I've described him, asked if they've seen a man standing outside, smiling. They all look at me like I'm crazy. They haven't seen him. Or they just don't see him. Emily's eyes widened slightly. That is really weird. Maybe they just haven't paid attention? People are oblivious, Sarah, you know that. Maybe, I said again, but the word felt hollow, insufficient. But it's not just that they haven't noticed him. It's like, when I describe him, they genuinely don't seem to recognize what I'm talking about. It's like he's invisible to them. Emily was silent for a moment, her gaze distant and thoughtful. Okay, she said finally, her voice serious. This is beyond just weird. This is unsettling. Maybe we should report him? Call the non-emergency police line? Say there's a suspicious person loitering? The idea resonated with a desperate hope. Action. Maybe action would break the spell, dispel the growing dread. Yes, I said eagerly. Yes, let's do that. Armed with Emily's hesitant support, I decided to take action. After lunch, I discreetly called the non-emergency police line from a secluded corner of the office. My voice trembled slightly as I described the smiling man, emphasizing the unsettling details, the unwavering smile, the stillness, the persistent presence. The operator listened patiently, her voice calm and professional. Okay, ma'am, she said when I finished. And you said this man is not doing anything illegal? He's just standing there? Yes, I confirmed, feeling a wave of frustration. But it's unsettling. He's been there for days. He just stares at the building and smiles. And it's really creepy. I understand, ma'am, the operator said, her voice still neutral. But unless he's actively harassing someone, trespassing, or engaging in any unlawful behavior, there's not much we can do. We can send a patrol car to check on the area, but if he's simply standing on public property, there's no legal basis for us to intervene. My heart sank. But it's not normal, I pleaded. It's not right. Can't you at least tell someone to talk to him? See if he's okay? Or if he needs help. We can certainly have an officer drive by and observe the situation, ma'am, the operator conceded. But I can't promise any further action unless there's a clear indication of criminal activity. Can you provide a description of the man and his location? I gave her a detailed description, emphasizing the unsettling smile and the unchanging posture, and provided the location of the Innovision building plaza. Thank you, ma'am, the operator said. We'll have an officer check it out. Is there anything else? No, I said, deflated. No, thank you. I hung up, the hope that had briefly flared dying down to a flickering ember. A patrol car would drive by. They'd see him, probably dismiss him as harmless and then leave. And he would still be there, smiling. Emily, sensing my discouragement, tried to be supportive. Hey, at least you tried, she said, squeezing my arm. Maybe the police will actually do something. You never know. But I did know. Deep down, I knew that reporting him was futile. It was like trying to catch smoke with your hands. The smiling man existed outside the realm of normal intervention, outside the bounds of reason. That afternoon, I tried a different approach. Confrontation. It was a desperate, reckless idea, but the growing unease was becoming unbearable. I had to know. I had to understand. I had to break through the wall of his unnerving silence. After work, instead of heading straight for the subway, I walked towards the plaza, my heart pounding a mixture of fear and a strange, morbid curiosity. As I approached, I saw him exactly where I expected him to be, still smiling, still facing the building. This time, I didn't hesitate. I walked directly towards him, my steps deliberate, my gaze fixed on his unnerving smile. As I got closer, I could feel the air around him grow colder, a subtle but distinct drop in temperature. "Excuse me," I said, my voice surprisingly steady despite the tremor in my hands. No response. He didn't move. He didn't even acknowledge my presence. His smile remained fixed, his gaze unwavering, locked on the glass and steel facade of Innovision Dynamics. "Excuse me." I repeated, louder this time, stepping directly in front of him, blocking his line of sight to the building. Still nothing. He was like a statue carved from pale flesh and perpetual grin. His eyes, dark and fathomless, seemed to look through me as if I wasn't even there. Frustration and a surge of anger welled up inside me. "Hey!" I shouted, my voice cracking slightly. "I'm talking to you. Why are you doing this? Why are you always here? Why are you smiling like that?" Silence. Unbroken, absolute silence. The bustling sounds of the plaza, the chatter of pedestrians, the distant rumble of traffic, seemed to fade into a muffled background hum, leaving only the oppressive stillness surrounding the smiling man. I reached out hesitantly and touched his arm. It was cold. Not just cool but profoundly, unnaturally cold, like touching marble that had been left in a freezer. A shiver ran down my spine, a deep, primal revulsion. I snatched my hand back, recoiling as if burned. "Stop it!" I yelled, my voice now trembling, edged with panic. "Stop smiling. Stop staring. Leave me alone." And then something shifted. Not in him but in the air around us. The silence deepened, becoming thick and oppressive, like a physical weight pressing down on my chest. The bustling sounds of the plaza seemed to vanish completely, leaving only an unnerving, echoing stillness. And his smile, it widened. Just a fraction, almost imperceptible, but enough to send a fresh wave of icy terror through my veins. It was as if my confrontation, my attempt to break his silence, had somehow encouraged him, made him stronger. Panic seized me, a cold, visceral flood. I stumbled backwards, away from him, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I turned and ran, blindly, desperately, not stopping until I was halfway down the block, gasping for air, my heart pounding like a trapped bird. I didn't look back. I couldn't. The image of that wider smile, the unnatural coldness of his touch, was burned into my mind, a brand of pure, unadulterated terror. That night, sleep was impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw him standing there, smiling, his gaze fixed, his presence looming. The world outside my apartment window seemed to fade into a gray, menacing backdrop, the city lights muted and weak, as if struggling against a rising darkness. By Thursday morning, the dread had solidified into a paralyzing fear. Going to work felt like walking into a trap. But staying home felt equally terrifying, a lonely confinement with the inescapable weight of his presence pressing down on me. I decided to try a different route to work, hoping to avoid the plaza, to create some distance between myself and the smiling man. I took a longer subway line, exited at a different station, and walked through back streets and alleys, my senses on high alert, constantly looking over my shoulder. For a brief, fleeting moment, I dared to hope. Maybe, just maybe, I had escaped him. Maybe he was only tied to the plaza, to the Innovision building. Maybe distance would break his hold. I reached Innovision, entering through a less-used side entrance, my heart pounding with a mixture of hope and trepidation. I hurried through the lobby, avoiding the main entrance, my breath held tight in my chest. I reached my cubicle, slumped into my chair and closed my eyes, letting out a shaky sigh of relief. I had made it. I was safe, at least for now. Then a cold draft, colder than any air conditioning could produce, brushed against my neck. A prickling sensation crawled across my skin, a feeling of being watched, amplified, overwhelming. Slowly, reluctantly, I opened my eyes. And there he was, standing at the end of the cubicle aisle, in the dimly lit corridor, just beyond the low partition of my workspace. He was inside Innovision Dynamics. He was closer than ever before. And he was smiling. His smile was wider now, impossibly so, stretching his lips thin and bloodless, revealing teeth that seemed to grow longer, sharper, more predatory. His eyes, dark pits in his pallid face, were fixed on me, burning into me, radiating a cold, malevolent intensity. The office noises, the tapping of keyboards, the murmur of conversations, the hum of the fluorescent lights, seemed to fade into a distant, meaningless drone. All that existed was him, his smile, his gaze, his terrifying, inescapable presence. He was inside. He had followed me. He had breached the sanctuary of my workplace. And he was closer. So much closer. A scream clawed its way up my throat, but it was trapped, choked, dying in the suffocating terror that had enveloped me. My world narrowed, contracted, shrinking down to the pale face, the fixed smile, the unblinking eyes of the man who smiled at me, and never left. The scream died in my throat, leaving behind a raw, burning ache. My colleagues in the nearby cubicles, oblivious to the silent horror unfolding just meters away, continued their work, their fingers tapping rhythmically on keyboards, their voices murmuring in mundane office conversations. They didn't see him. They didn't hear my silent scream. They existed in a different reality, a reality untouched by the cold, encroaching presence of the smiling man. He stood there at the end of the aisle, his smile unwavering, his gaze locked on me. He didn't move, didn't speak, didn't make a sound. But the silence around him was deafening, a silence pregnant with dread, thick with an unspoken menace. Panic clawed at me, a frantic, desperate urge to escape. But where could I go? He was inside. He had followed me in. There was no sanctuary, no escape. Slowly, deliberately, I backed away from my cubicle, my eyes fixed on him, every muscle in my body tense, coiled, ready to flee. He mirrored my movement, stepping forward, closing the distance, his smile widening with each step. It was a slow, agonizing dance of terror, a silent pursuit in the sterile landscape of the office corridor. I backed away, he advanced. I moved to the left, he shifted to intercept. He was always there, always in front of me, his smile a fixed point in my vision, a beacon of impending doom. The office lights flickered, just for a moment, a subtle, almost imperceptible tremor of the fluorescent tubes. But in that flicker I saw something in his eyes, a flicker of something else. Something beneath the dark, empty surface, something ancient and cold and vast. It was gone as quickly as it appeared, swallowed back into the fathomless blackness of his gaze. But the glimpse, fleeting as it was, sent a fresh wave of icy dread through me. It wasn't just a man. It was something more. Something other. I stumbled back, tripping over the edge of the cubicle partition, falling backwards onto the carpeted floor. The sudden movement seemed to break the spell, to shatter the oppressive silence. The office noises rushed back in, jarring and discordant. My colleagues looked up, startled by the sound of my fall. "Sarah? Are you okay?" Mark, ever the concerned colleague, rushed over, his brow furrowed with worry. He helped me to my feet, his eyes scanning my face, his concern deepening. "You look terrible. What happened?" I wanted to point, to scream, to show them, to make them see him. But he was gone. The corridor behind me was empty, devoid of any unnatural presence. Just the sterile, lifeless office hallway, stretching into the distance. "Nothing," I mumbled, my voice hoarse, barely audible. I just tripped. Clumsy me." I forced a weak, shaky smile, trying to mimic normalcy, to blend back into their oblivious reality. Mark didn't look convinced, his gaze lingering on my pale face, my trembling hands. "Are you sure? You look really shaken up." "Just tired," I insisted, my voice gaining a little strength. "Didn't sleep well again. Long week, you know." He nodded slowly, still unconvinced, but accepting my explanation. He patted my arm awkwardly and retreated back to his cubicle, casting worried glances back at me every few moments. I stood there, swaying slightly, my heart still hammering against my ribs, my senses on high alert. He was gone. But I knew he wasn't truly gone. He was still here. Somewhere. Watching. Smiling. The rest of the day was a surreal, distorted nightmare. I went through the motions of my work, but my mind was racing, consumed by the smiling man. I kept expecting him to reappear, to step out from behind a cubicle partition, to materialize in the break room, to loom in the reflection of the office windows. But he didn't. He remained unseen, unheard, yet his presence was palpable, a cold, oppressive weight in the air, a constant prickling sensation on my skin, a gnawing certainty that I was being watched. The world around me began to subtly warp, to bend and distort under the weight of my paranoia. Shadows seemed deeper, darker, moving in ways that defied the office lighting. Reflections in the polished surfaces of the building seemed to flicker and distort, showing glimpses of something else, something just beyond the edge of perception, before snapping back into mundane office reflections. Sounds became strange, echoing and distorted. The hum of the fluorescent lights seemed to deepen into a low, resonant drone, almost subsonic, vibrating in my bones. The tapping of keyboards became a frantic, rhythmic clicking, like the chattering of teeth in a blizzard. Murmured conversations morphed into unintelligible whispers, as if the very walls were whispering secrets, secrets about him, secrets about me, secrets about the nature of reality itself. I started to question my sanity. Was I hallucinating? Was this all in my head? Was I having a breakdown, a descent into madness? The thought was terrifying but also strangely comforting. If it was all in my head, then maybe, just maybe, there was a way to control it, to escape it. But deep down, I knew it wasn't a hallucination. It was too real, too consistent, too tangible. The coldness, the silence, the overwhelming sense of dread, these weren't figments of my imagination. They were real. It was real. Something real, something terrifying, something fundamentally unnatural. As the afternoon wore on, the distortions intensified. Time seemed to stretch and compress, moments lingering for an eternity, hours blurring into a meaningless haze. The office environment, once sterile and predictable, now felt alien, oppressive, subtly menacing. The faces of my colleagues seemed to shift and change, their features blurring, their expressions becoming subtly distorted, their eyes, sometimes just for a fleeting moment, mirroring the dark, fathomless gaze of the smiling man. I recoiled from them, from their touch, from their voices, feeling a growing sense of alienation, of separation. They were in their reality and I was in mine. And my reality was being consumed, corrupted by the presence of the smiling man. As the workday drew to a close, the feeling of dread reached a fever pitch. The thought of leaving the office, of venturing back into the outside world, filled me with icy terror. But staying felt equally unbearable, a slow, suffocating entrapment in a reality that was unraveling around me. With trembling hands, I packed my bag, my movements jerky and uncoordinated. I avoided eye contact with my colleagues, feeling their oblivious normalcy like a painful reproach. I was alone. Completely and utterly alone in this escalating nightmare. As I walked towards the exit, the office lights flickered again, more intensely this time, casting long, dancing shadows that seemed to writhe and twist with a life of their own. And in the distorted reflections of the glass doors, I saw him. Not his reflection, but him. Standing just beyond the doors on the deserted pedestrian plaza, bathed in the fading twilight. He was facing the building as always, but this time, his head was tilted slightly as if he was listening, as if he was waiting. And his smile, it was wider than ever before. It seemed to stretch across his entire face, consuming his features, leaving only two dark pits for eyes and a gaping maw of unnerving cheerfulness. And then I saw it. Something else, something that finally shattered the last vestiges of my denial, something that plunged me into the abyss of sheer, unadulterated terror. Behind him, stretching out across the deserted plaza, in the deepening twilight, I saw shadows. Not normal shadows, cast by the fading light and the surrounding buildings. These were wrong shadows. They were too dark, too deep, too alive. They writhed and pulsed, stretching out from him, tendrils of darkness reaching across the plaza, encroaching, consuming. And from the shadows, other figures began to emerge. Shapes, vague and indistinct at first, coalescing, solidifying, taking on form. Figures that were, like him, pale still, smiling. But different too. Twisted, distorted, grotesque variations on his unnerving smile. They were multiplying. Spreading out across the plaza, a silent, smiling legion emerging from the encroaching darkness. And they were all facing the Innovision building. And they were all waiting. My breath hitched, caught in my throat like a shard of ice. The shadows, the figures, the multiplying smiles, it was too much, too overwhelming, too profoundly wrong. Reality itself seemed to crack, to splinter, to dissolve into a swirling vortex of unreason and dread. I stumbled backwards, away from the glass doors, away from the horrifying tableau unfolding outside. I retreated into the office lobby, my mind reeling, my body trembling, my senses screaming in protest. The lobby, once a mundane space of polished chrome and corporate art, now felt like a fragile barrier, a thin membrane separating me from the encroaching darkness, from the legion of smiling figures waiting just beyond the glass doors. I looked around, desperately seeking what? Sanctuary? Escape? Understanding? The lobby was deserted, silent, the security guard at his desk engrossed in his phone, oblivious to the cosmic horror gathering just outside. They didn't see it. They couldn't see it. Just like they hadn't seen the smiling man before. They were blind, trapped in their own limited perception of reality, unaware of the true nature of the world, the vast, unseen forces that were gathering, converging, closing in. And then it hit me. The revelation, the terrifying explanation, the answer to the question that had been gnawing at me, driving me to the brink of madness. Why him? Why me? Why this relentless, inescapable presence? Why the smile? Why would he never leave? It wasn't about me, not in the way I had initially feared. It wasn't about targeting or harassment or personal vengeance. It was something far more fundamental. Something cosmic. The Innovision building. He was always facing the Innovision building. Always smiling at it. And now, the legion of smiling figures, emerging from the shadows, they were all facing the building too. Innovision dynamics. Innovision. Innovation. Progress. Technology. Humanity's relentless drive forward, our insatiable hunger for progress, our blind faith in the power of technology to solve all our problems, to conquer nature, to transcend our limitations. That was it. That was what he was smiling at. That was what they were waiting for. Not the building itself, but what it represented. What it contained. Innovision Dynamics, a symbol of human ambition, a monument to our relentless pursuit of the future, our unwavering belief in our own progress. And he and they were drawn to it. Drawn to the energy, the ambition, the attention that pulsed within its walls. The smiling man wasn't a ghost, not a demon, not a monster in the traditional sense. He was something else. Something older, something deeper, something that existed outside the boundaries of human understanding, outside the realm of our limited perception of reality. He was a manifestation of something fundamental, something inevitable. Entropy. That was it. The terrifying revelation. He was a manifestation of entropy. The second law of thermodynamics, the inescapable decay of order into disorder, the slow, inexorable slide towards chaos and oblivion. He was the smile of decay, the grin of dissolution, the unchanging visage of the universe's inevitable slide into heat death. He was drawn to energy, to order, to complexity, to anything that resisted entropy, anything that dared to strive for progress, for innovation, for life itself. He was drawn to it like a moth to a flame, but not to consume it, but simply to watch it, to smile at it, to witness its inevitable decay. And he would never leave because entropy never leaves. It is always there, always present, always watching, always smiling, waiting for everything to unravel, to decay, to return to the indifferent chaos from which it sprung. The legion of smiling figures emerging from the shadows, they were all aspects of entropy, different facets of the same inexorable force, drawn to innovision, drawn to humanity's hubris, drawn to the illusion of progress, the fleeting flicker of order in a universe destined for chaos. And they were multiplying because entropy is always multiplying, always expanding, always encroaching, consuming everything in its path. And they were smiling because entropy finds humor in the futile struggle against its inevitable victory. It smiles at our ambitions, our dreams, our desperate attempts to create order in a universe designed for disorder. It smiles at our ignorance, our arrogance, our blind faith in progress, our denial of the fundamental truth of decay. And why had he chosen me? Why had he smiled at me? Because I had seen him. Because I had noticed him. Because I had broken through the veil of oblivious normalcy. Because I had glimpsed the true nature of reality, the cold, indifferent truth that lay beneath the surface of our carefully constructed illusion of order. He smiled at me because I had acknowledged him. Because I had recognized his presence. Because I had, in a small, insignificant way, understood the terrifying truth that he embodied. And once you see entropy, once you acknowledge it, once you understand its inevitable presence, it never leaves you. It becomes a part of your reality, a constant companion, a silent witness to your futile struggle against the inevitable. And he would never leave because entropy will never leave. It is the fundamental law of the universe, the inescapable truth of existence. And now I saw it. Now I understood. And now he would always be there, smiling. Part 6, the mind-shattering conclusion. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow, leaving me breathless, reeling, my mind struggling to grasp the enormity of the revelation. Entropy. The universe's slow slide into chaos. And he, the smiling man, a manifestation of that inescapable truth. The security guard at his desk still hadn't noticed anything. He was scrolling through his phone, a small island of oblivious normalcy in the rising tide of cosmic horror. I wanted to scream, to shout, to shake him, to make him see, to make him understand. But what was the point? He wouldn't see. Nobody would see. They were all trapped in their own limited realities, blind to the vast, terrifying truth that was unfolding around them. And perhaps it was better that way. Perhaps ignorance was bliss. Perhaps the illusion of order, the comforting lie of progress, was all that kept humanity from succumbing to the paralyzing weight of existential dread. But I had seen. I had broken through the illusion. And now I was trapped in the terrifying reality of entropy, the inescapable presence of the smiling man, the legion of smiling figures gathering in the twilight, the encroaching shadows, the distorted world around me. The glass doors of the Innovision building, once a symbol of modern progress, now felt like the bars of a cage trapping me inside, sealing me off from the outside world, a world that was being consumed by shadows and smiles. I looked back at the security guard, his face illuminated by the blue glow of his phone screen, his expression serene, untroubled. He was safe. He was still living in the illusion. And I was adrift in the terrifying reality of entropy, alone with the smiling man and his silent, smiling legion. A cold wave of despair washed over me, a profound sense of hopelessness, of utter futility. What was the point of fighting? What was the point of trying to escape? Entropy was inevitable. Decay was inevitable. And the smiling man, he was inevitable. The lights in the lobby flickered again, violently this time, plunging the space into near darkness for a moment, before sputtering back to life, casting long, distorted shadows that danced and writhed on the walls. And in the brief flicker of darkness, I heard it. A sound I hadn't heard before, a sound that sent a final, shattering wave of terror through me. A chuckle. A low, dry, rustling chuckle, like the sound of dry leaves skittering across asphalt in a cold wind. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, echoing in the vast emptiness of the lobby, vibrating in my bones. The security guard didn't react. He didn't hear it. Or perhaps he chose not to hear it. Perhaps, deep down, on some subconscious level, he sensed the encroaching darkness, the rising tide of entropy, and his mind simply shut it out, clinging to the illusion of normalcy, desperately trying to maintain the fragile barrier against the overwhelming truth. But I heard it, and I understood. The chuckle wasn't malicious, not angry, not even particularly malevolent. It was amused. The chuckle of entropy, amused by my fear, amused by my struggle, amused by the futility of it all. The lights flickered again, and this time they didn't come back on. The lobby plunged into complete darkness, absolute, impenetrable darkness. The only illumination came from the dim, fading twilight filtering through the glass doors, casting long, skeletal shadows that stretched across the deserted lobby floor. And in the darkness I heard the sound again. The chuckle. Closer this time. Much closer. And then another sound. A sound that made my blood run cold, that froze me to the spot, that shattered the last vestiges of my sanity. The sound of footsteps. Slow, deliberate, measured footsteps, echoing in the darkness, approaching from the glass doors, from the encroaching twilight, from the legion of smiling figures waiting just beyond the thin barrier of glass. Footsteps that were coming closer. Footsteps that were heading towards me. Footsteps that belonged to him. The smiling man. He was inside. He was in the darkness. He was coming for me. And there was nowhere left to run. Nowhere left to hide. Nowhere left to escape the inevitable embrace of entropy, the inescapable presence of the man who smiled at me, and never left. The footsteps drew closer, echoing in the darkness. And with each step, the smile, the unwavering, unchanging, terrifying smile, drew closer to consuming me, closer to erasing me, closer to returning me to the indifferent chaos from which I had sprung. And as the darkness enveloped me, as the footsteps drew closer, as the smile loomed larger, I understood the final, chilling truth. He wasn't just smiling at me. He was smiling at all of us. At humanity. At life itself. At the universe. And he would never leave because he is the universe. He is entropy. He is decay. He is the inevitable end. And he will always be here. Smiling. Waiting. And never leaving. Never. The darkness closed in. The footsteps drew closer. And the smile, it became the only thing I could see, the only thing I could feel, the only thing that existed in the vast, encroaching emptiness. The smile of entropy. The smile of oblivion. The smile that never left.